Hi, good to see you guys again. So today's gonna be a different video. I know my usual content consists of topics revolving around champion design or various aspects of League, but to avoid burning out, I wanted to make something a little more lighthearted today. I already mentioned that I believe the direction Riot should be taking right now is reworking all champions that are either super outdated or in a poor spot, and so far they have a schedule/roadmap on what champions they plan on getting out in the coming years. So Dr. Mundo is scheduled for next patch as of writing this script, then Udyr is on his way sometime in 2022, most likely during winter or spring. They also have Cho'Gath, Nocturne, Quinn, Rammus, Shaco, Shyvana, Skarner, and Tryndamere. I think it's a pretty solid list since we can all agree these guys need some updating, but there's 5 others that I believe should also be there too. I'm gonna give a brief overview of their playstyles and what's wrong with them, then talk about some ideas for how I think they can be reworked. And after you're done watching, if you have some ideas of your own, I'd love to hear them in the comment section, so let's get started. Tomcat is gonna be first. Now, I understand they're already working on a little something in the PvE for him, but I thought it was worth talking about him anyway. He's a very unique tank and the only one who can do his job. Main gist of his gameplay is that he swallows things. He can pick up an ally and just keep them in his stomach for protection since they become untargetable for the duration. He used to be able to ferry them around because he would get a huge boost of movement speed when running towards enemies, but they sort of removed that, and a lot of other things, which is why he's here. Right now, Tomcat has too degenerate of a playstyle. Not because of his Devour mechanic, I actually think that's a cool concept because he's basically a walking QSS for anyone on his team. And before you think that's a super overpowered gimmick and it needs to be nerfed or removed, that's sort of what Wardens are supposed to do. Shen can protect his allies from basic attacks, Poppy can block dashes, Braum intercepts projectiles, and Tomcat can protect an ally from just about everything, but only one person. Being able to ferry someone with him through Abyssal Voyage can also lead to some really fancy macro plays. Here's the problem. I think Riot is trying way too hard to make him an independent champion. When he first came out, he was meant to be a support, but then a few people realized he's the hardest counter to just about any melee champion because he deals so much damage while being so tanky, so they started taking him top lane. So what they've been doing over time, also to counteract the fact that pro players really love Tomcat, is gradually stripping him away of his supportive capabilities such as the bonus movement speed or being able to apply passive stacks with his Q. Adding insult to injury, they actually hard nerfed his Devour by basically preventing him from moving when he had either friend or foe in his belly, and drastically weakened his rank 1 ultimate, essentially killing his support capabilities. To compensate for this, they gave him a lot more solo lane strength by buffing his Q damage, slow and stun, his E shield and regen, and his passive damage. Thing is, even though he's incredibly strong 1v1, in teamfights he's probably the worst juggernaut in the game because he's purely single target. He has no mobility and he takes too long to actually kill someone to the point where a single Lulu or Janna stops him from doing just about anything. I think the goal behind all changes to his kit was to make him similar to Shen, a tank that can somewhat hold their own in solo lanes but provide their teammates with some token utility. But it doesn't work for Mr. Catfish because he's a lot more conditional since he was a support to begin with. What I think they need to do is just embrace his old role by changing his abilities to be very support oriented and not just his W. It would be interesting to see how they can perhaps change his Q and E to provide something of benefit to his teammates maybe. Like for example, I had this thought that maybe if he swallows an ally and then uses thick skin, the ally receives maybe a small portion of that shield when he regurgitates them. Apart from that, they're already working on some stuff for him and I believe Tomcat is slated to be revamped this coming summer, so for now we'll just leave it at that. Next champion is Malphite. Technically speaking, he's in a decent spot. He routinely holds a 5 to 10% pick rate, which is pretty good. He has a 50 to 51% win rate right now, and most of the time, he's a safe and reliable champion to pick up whenever you get autofilled top lane, since it's pretty hard to mess up on him. In a similar fashion to Tomcat, Malphite not only becomes more durable when you build tank items, but he also dishes out more damage. His Thunderclap and Ground Slam both have armor scaling, and the former gives him a free passive bonus to armor. In teamfights, he's supposed to be the super big engage with his iconic ultimate, and is more or less built to hard counter heavy attack damage comps. So what's his problem? His playstyle. Malphite can be quite possibly the most frustrating matchup for the majority of top laners, even AP champions. This isn't just specific to him as a lot of tanks these days are gaining increasingly higher and higher damage, but it's most pronounced on him. His entire game plan in lane is to spam Q on you over and over and over again since it has a decently low cooldown, long range, and does pretty solid damage especially when paired with Arcane Comet and Scorch. And then once you get low enough he all-ins you for a kill. It's the same kind of playstyle that old Pantheon had, where he just spammed Q on you over and over and over again until you were low enough for him to execute you. Problem is, he's impossible to trade against because Ground Slam slashes your attack speed in half, which is bad because a lot of top laners are auto attackers, and Q steals 40% movement speed, which makes you slow and him fast so he can run away. The main reason he doesn't have a super high win rate is because he tends to be a lot less reliable in teamfights compared to other tanks, since his ultimate is the only hard crowd control, whereas Ornn or Malphite can lay down a lot more. Actually, when I put it like that, he suffers from a similar issue as Tomcat, where he's specifically designed to cheese lane and not much else. Even though his initial ultimate engage is a wet dream for all Yasuo mains, how he plays throughout both laning phase and in the mid to late game hinges on what the enemy team composition is. If they have a bunch of mages or tank shredders, then most of the time they can deal with him no problem. Same with in lane. Sylas, Rumble, Mordekaiser, or Vladimir, pretty much any AP champion can deal with him or at least go even. Outside of his passive and ultimate, I don't really see a thematic purpose to any of his basic abilities. If he's supposed to be a living mountain, then stealing movement speed and slowing attack speed makes absolutely no sense. It would seem more appropriate for him to throw boulders or create earthquakes or something a rock type Pokemon like Regirock or Gigalith or Golem would do. In game, he's mostly a stat checker you pick if the enemy top laner locks in any physical damage auto attacker like Jax, Tryndamere, or Quinn. Continuing down the list is Aurelion Sol. He's a shining example of wasted potential. A space dragon who can conjure and destroy stars is one of the least played champions in the game. Now, in his defense, I think his abilities are actually fine conceptually, but the way it plays is where everyone gets turned off. The 3 stars that orbit around him are his main source of DPS, and he can expand them to an outer area for more damage, speed, and range. Make no mistake, Sol can do a lot of damage, like a lot. If you get hit by one too many boops, you are going to die. The issue is, Center of the Universe is very counterintuitive and uncomfortable for the vast majority of players. The fact that he basically has a dead zone in melee range is enough to deter many people from picking him up. He's the only person with this issue. Darius, Camille, and Lilia have attacks that need to be spaced out for maximum potency, but the first 2 are champions that very much would like to be right next to you, and Lilia moves really fast, so she can kite you out anyway. Aurelion Sol has neither property, and his damage, while certainly high, is very difficult to execute on. I talked about all these issues in my Why No One Plays episode on him, but the reason he struggles so much to see even a 1% pick rate is because he feels too stringent. Despite being able to quite literally manipulate stars, it really doesn't feel like that in-game. Star Surge sucks at point blank, and even if you pull off one of those super massive ones from a long distance that covers the entire screen, it doesn't do that much damage. His passive stars can only expand and contract and are super small in hitbox. In fact, they don't even seem that threatening, even though each one probably has enough power to level a continent. Most Sol mains are just clamoring for his passive toggle castback, and I think that can definitely make him feel more intuitive, but if they ever want him to be a mainstream champion, they need to completely rework him. I'm talking Aatrox levels. Currently, as it stands, he's the most uncomfortable champion to play in the entire game for 99% of the player base. The most important thing that needs to be addressed when reworking him is to deal with him being this awkward mixture between long-range engage like Zac and a battle mage like Anivia, neither of which complement each other. He should either be a dedicated diver or a dedicated battle mage because those 2 subclasses are incompatible. Okay, we have 2 more, so let's go back to the top lane again. Illaoi. This might be the champion I think will be met with some contention by those who main her because a good number of people actually love her current playstyle. I know Dirty Mobs watched my Why No One Plays Illaoi video and actually endorsed it, so if you're watching this, shoot me a DM on Twitter of what you think about my proposed changes. Anyways, Illaoi is an area control juggernaut who's at her strongest when she's got a lot of tentacles around her, and the 2 ways she can do that are by infecting an enemy champion with her E, who then runs out of range, or by using Leap of Faith smack dab in the middle of a team fight. She's known for being a really high priority raid boss to either avoid or take down immediately because she has arguably the highest burst damage ceiling out of her peers. Everyone else takes time to get going, and even Darius needs to wait a bit before he gets 5 stacks, whereas Illaoi can press R and start mashing right away. However, she's also the most clunky and sluggish juggernaut. Her attacks are all slow and heavy, Q, W, and E are all laggy moves in terms of cast time, and I'd wager she's also really inconsistent because she can either do crazy amounts of damage if everyone clumps up in her ultimate, or do none at all if everyone scatters and kites her out. In her Why No One Plays episode, I also brought up how E is a terribly designed ability. Before, it actually used to make sense. She would pull out your spirit and force you to make a choice. Take the chance and contest her to grab it back, or cut your losses and run away to break the tether. but they removed that option, so basically the only safe choice her opponent has is to simply run away. Testo's Spirit actively discourages interaction, which can lead to laning phases where neither top laner can really advance the game state since they just farm and don't go for trades. Also in teamfights, provided they aren't trapped in Baron Pit or like a Jarvan Cataclysm, it's very easy for the enemy team to handle Illaoi by simply running away from her. That and outside of her ultimate, she has no easy way to set up tentacles the way Heimerdinger can his turrets. I think Illaoi Z needs to be reworked into something that forces her enemies to fight her rather than run away. I remember making a comment in her video that it's kind of peculiar how she can control tentacles, yet nothing in her kit grabs stuff. You look at literally any tentacle monster in movies or games and they usually grab people with them, yet Illaoi doesn't, which is strange. An easy change I think they can make to her E is to turn it into a slow hook type ability that debuffs the enemy caught and causes tentacles to automatically attack her like her current one. So you trade the spirit thingy for hard crowd control, and it can make the rest of her abilities much easier to land since she's right on top of them. Last on the list is Yorick. So Yorick is a bit of a special case. Currently, I think his design is fine, at least compared to the dumpster fire that was his old one, but hear me out on this one. This is more of a personal, I guess, preference. His entire shtick is to overwhelm you through sheer pack size. Since you have to fight him, his maiden, and likely 4 ghouls, he's an amazing raid boss split pusher since by the late game he does crazy damage while being super tanky, and he has a relatively solid laning phase with his sustain and ghoul harass. So his gameplay overall isn't bad, but where I think there's a bit of a boo-boo in his design is how uncreative his ghouls feel. Even though old Yorick was just mostly face roll, one thing I did like about him was that he had different ghouls. Omen of War was the physical damage and movement speed one, Omen of Pestilence did magic damage and slowed, and Omen of Famine was the lifesteal ghoul. Currently, all ghouls are the same, which I felt was the one thing that they made a mistake getting rid of. Then there's also the added issue of him being somewhat impractical for a split pusher since even though he bulldozes towers, wave clear is not the fastest and he's also slow and easy to catch out compared to someone like Tryndamere. What I think would be really cool is if we put more emphasis on the different types of ghouls and not so much him. An idea I had was to make him spawn a different ghoul based on the number of graves he had on the ground. If he had 6, they would combine together to summon a big burly ghoul with a lot of health and defense. If he had 3 graves, he would spawn a speedy ghoul who runs at enemies really fast, or something like that, and he could only have 1 ghoul at a time instead of huge swarms. Or alternatively, we can pull off a Kiana and make it so he can spawn a different elemental ghoul like an icy ghoul if he's in the river, or a burning ghoul if he spawns it near the red buff camp, something like that. It's not that his current design is bad, it's just I feel like they missed out on a potential golden opportunity by not adding some sort of variety with his mooks, you know? So there you have it, Tomcat, Malphite, Aurelion Sol, Illaoi, and Yorick. You may have noticed a lot of these are top laners, but given the rework list already covers a ton of junglers, those were the only ones I can really think of. Mid, ADC, and support are otherwise pretty well updated. What about you guys? Do you have some other champions you think need a rework, or if you disagree with the ones I've chosen? I'd like to hear your thoughts as well. If you enjoyed, a rating would be much appreciated, and don't forget to sub to the channel for more content like this. Consider following me on my socials and join my Discord server if you like, but for now, that's it for today. Thanks for watching and I hope to see you again soon. Take care.